Today we're going to try to get into the holiday baking spirit and make some cinnamon roll cookies. So I saw this recipe going around from sallysbaking.com. I have seen some mixed reviews. I'm not really a good baker, so I'm interested to see how this will turn out. But to start, we need 12 tablespoons of butter and 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and we're going to cream that together. Make sure your butter is at room temperature, otherwise it's going to be very difficult, but just mix those together, hit it with a hand mixer. You could do it in a stand mixer if you want, but there's no reason to. This is going to work totally fine. You'll know it's finished when you don't feel very coarse sugar grains between your fingers and the butter. Also give it a taste, it's pretty delicious. But once you do that, we're going to add 2 more things. It's going to be 2 teaspoons of vanilla and then 1 whole egg that you also had out at room temperature. I'll also post a link down to the full detailed instructions, and that way you can see all the measurements written out. But just mix that all together, and now we're ready to move on to the dry ingredients. This is 2 1/4 cups of flour. We're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Add in your butter mixture and then just mix that together. You could use your stand mixer, whatever you want. I'm going to then start to bring it together a little bit by hand. You don't want to overwork this. And then I'm going to throw it out onto my board and just try to make a dough-like substance. It's going to be very crackly and craggy. Just try to get it as cohesive as you can. And then my mistake was rolling it out on my cutting board. I thought I would get it nice and flat here. Your goal is about 1/2 inch thick, but it's stuck to the board. So do the rolling process on something that is non-stick so you can transfer it. So I rolled it out right on my Silpat, right on my baking sheet. And it actually kind of helped because the baking sheet kept the roller from going too deep. So 1/2 inch right there is what you're looking for. Throw that off to the side, and now we're going to make the cinnamon roll interior, which is going to be 2 tablespoons of butter, 1/4 cup of sugar, and then 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, and just a little whisk that all together like Babish would do. You could use a fork too if you want, totally fine. And then once you mix that all together, it should look like coarse kind of wet sand. Just pour that out right onto the dough you made previously. You don't need to refrigerate it or anything. You want it kind of soft and malleable, because once you fully spread that out, you're going to roll it like a cinnamon bun. This is really difficult. It's going to break and crack on you as you roll it. Do your best to just kind of pinch those parts back together or smooth it out with your finger. The dough is pretty forgiving. Don't be afraid of those big kind of tears you see there. And as you just roll it, kind of keep sliding it back to yourself. It's kind of Wellington-like also. And then just keep fixing the cracks. That's all you got to do. It's going to be pretty forgiving at the end because you're going to put it in the fridge, which will just help solidify this and make the cutting and cooking process easier. But once you roll it down to the end, just keep kind of fixing it and do your best here to kind of tighten it. Make it as tight as you can, push it down, and now just fix those seams. Go around it and work it the best you can. And once you're happy with that, we're just going to throw this into the fridge for 2 hours and let it really harden, and then cutting it and cooking it will be a piece of cake. But that's what you're looking for right there. And here we are 2 hours later. It's completely solid. It'll be very easy to cut at this point. So just transfer it to your cutting board. I'm going to cut the ends off where the cinnamon didn't really make it there, and then cut these into 1/2 inch pieces. That's one of the issues I actually had with this. I think you should cut them a little bit smaller, but we'll dive into that. But you can see those layers in there. They're not perfectly swirled like a cinnamon bun. And that's probably just because I rolled it poorly, but it's doing the trick. You get the gist of what it should look like. And once you cut those all off, we're just going to throw those onto a baking sheet, and then we're going to pop them into the oven, 350 degrees. And then while those are in the oven, we're going to make the glaze for the top, the icing. It's going to be 120 grams of powdered sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, and then 3 tablespoons of milk. I've seen some people use heavy cream. If you want it a little thicker, that's totally fine. And just stir that together, and that's a very, very simple icing. It's pretty delicious. Make sure you give it a little taste just for fun. And now for the cookies. Sally cites that cook them for 10 to 11 minutes until the edges are nice and golden brown. That, for me, took almost 18 minutes. We're going to transfer these now off to a cooling rack and just let them sit for 5 minutes. But they look pretty good. They're not burnt, so I didn't cook them for too long. But that's what was confusing about this recipe. Probably a little thinner and they would have been fine, but let's cut one open, make sure it's fully cooked, and just see how it tastes before the icing process. Yeah, it looks like a big, thick sugar cookie. Doesn't have a ton of taste to it, so let's see what the icing kind of does to elevate this, but we're just going to drizzle it over with a little bit of a spoon. You could dunk them right in there if you want, but overall impressions of how they look, I'm pretty content with that. I'm definitely not a baker, as I've said, but taste-wise, I think they leave a little bit to be desired. They're a little dry. That might just because they cooked for longer and they were a little too thick, but that is what the website said. But there's not a ton of flavor other than that. They don't really taste like sugar cookies. They're kind of more like biscuity. I don't know. I even want to call this a scone. Could all of this have been user error? Probably, but I don't think I recommend this dish at this point.